which players are rising and which players are falling after the Senior Bowl. As always, make sure to like this video and hit the subscribe button. I believe we're about 25 subscribers away from 1,100. Help us get there. It's officially Dynasty rookie season. I know we still have the Super Bowl, but man, Senior Bowl all last week. Game was actually played on Saturday, but the practices were happening last week. We have Combine coming up in less than a month now. I'm excited. We're all excited. And we're looking at some risers and some fallers. And is the Senior Bowl the be all end all? Absolutely not. Is there some value in it? Of course. Teams get to see players, seniors in particular, go up against the best of the best in college. And some guys' stock can definitely rise, like for a few of these players, and some stock can fall. Absolutely. But we're starting off with quarterbacks, and we're talking about a riser in the Senior Bowl. Now, all of this was based off of my research as well as research from a lot of people that I respect in the industry and I respect their words. So Jackson Dart is a riser in this. He's obviously a quarterback from Ole Miss. You see the numbers there, very, very productive numbers, pretty good rushing production as well, which I don't think a lot of people realize. 500 yards rushing. I believe he had a season of over 600. I'm starting to get the feeling with this quarterback class, like, is there a chance that these teams at the top that need quarterbacks, Cleveland, Tennessee, even the Giants potentially, do they go the route of, I'm just going to take best player available, whether that's Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham. There's some ridiculously good defensive talent in this draft. And then do they kind of say, well, I'm going to take one of those potentially generational defensive players, and then maybe target a quarterback in the second round, a Jalen Milroe or potentially a Jackson Dart. He's rising up boards. I'm very, very interested to see how far he rises. If he does sneak into that early second round, I basically say, if you're not a first round pick, you're not a top 10 quarterback pick, top 15, you really want to be in that top 40, top 50. Mid second is kind of the cutoff. As soon as the quarterback falls to the third round, the historical hit rate is just not very good. But early second round, we can work with that. I am curious to see where Jackson Dart goes. Is he now the QB3 in this draft class? Potentially. I do think the QB3 spot is open, in my personal opinion, behind Shedeur Sanders and, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Is it Dylan Gabriel? Is it Milroe? Is it Will Howard? Is it Jackson Dart, Riley Leonard? There's a lot of guys, that could potentially fall into that QB3. And it seems to be that Jackson Dart is rising a bit, and he had a pretty good Senior Bowl. I don't think any quarterback looked particularly amazing, which kind of plays into how, this quarterback class in general. But I do think Jackson Dart was probably the best of them at the Senior Bowl. In terms of fallers, though, Jalen Milroe, in my opinion, was a faller. If you've watched any of our videos for Dynasty specific, I've been kind of on the Jalen Milroe boat. If he was gonna be taken in that early second round, early to mid second round, then I was kind of in on him in Dynasty rookie draft because of his rushing production. We see it there, over 700 yards rushing, 20 rushing touchdowns. But his ability to throw the ball is not looking great. To read defenses is not looking great. He was late on his throws. The ball placement wasn't quite there. He's kind of a work in progress. He has elite athleticism, but he's just inconsistent with his quarterback play. And does that make him fall a bit? Does the team take a shot on him in the second round? I really don't know. And a lot of it where he's going to go in Dynasty rookie drafts, especially Superflex, is going to depend on where he does go. If he does somehow sneak into the early second round, then I think he's a fringe first round pick in Dynasty Superflex. But if he falls further, and on top of the weaknesses that he seems to have, then he might fall to late second, third round pick in Dynasty Superflexes, depending on where he goes. But he definitely seemed to be a faller this week out of the quarterbacks. Again, no quarterback really, I don't think, stood out above the rest and was amazing. But I do think that Milroe was kind of the biggest potential faller here. Some running backs. Now, a lot of the running backs were just good, and we can expect that because this is a good running back class. I have some mixed results on Ollie Gordon. Some people think he was a riser. Some people think the fact that he weighed in at 233, I believe it was, is actually a bad thing. I thought from what I was reading, what I was seeing on clips and Twitter and watching the game, for all these guys, I thought that Ollie Gordon actually looked pretty good, and he's interesting to me because again, coming into the 2024 season, the guy was amazing. Like the guy was considered the RB1. He was Ashton Jeanty before Ashton Jeanty. He rushed, he had over 2,200 or over 2,000 total yards in 2023. He scored a bunch of touchdowns. He was a complete back, and he fell off. And part of me makes me think, and I've been talking about this recently about Chuba Hubbard. Not only did they both go to Oklahoma State, but they were both, pretty high recruits. I think Chuba was a 5-star recruit out of high school. Ollie Gordon was a 4-star recruit. They both had massive second-year sophomore seasons at their school. Chuba Hubbard also had over 2,000 yards, and then they both had disappointing third seasons. And Chuba Hubbard fell because of it. And now we're seeing, hey, maybe there were other circumstances that were going along with the reason why Chuba Hubbard had a bad third season. Maybe, and some people believe this, OSU fans, some of them believe this as well, that maybe it was more than just Ollie Gordon, and maybe it was just like the entire offense in general not being up to snuff, and that's what led to kind of a poor season from him. So I'm just curious, like I'm probably going to take a shot on Ollie Gordon if he's going to be falling to like the third round in Dynasty rookie drafts, just because can someone unlock what we saw a couple years ago. But I thought he actually looked pretty good. The fact that he's 233, I mean, it could be looked upon as a good thing. It could be looked upon as a bad thing. We're going to see how he tests out at the combine. I think that's going to be a big determiner on whether or not it's a good or bad thing. If he still runs, a 4.4 or in the low 4.5s or something at 230, 233, then I'm okay with it. But obviously there's more than just running, but he's an interesting one to take a shot on in Dynasty rookie drafts right now. Brashard Smith, a guy that I haven't gotten around to scouting just quite yet. I did move him up my list of scouting, though, because he seemed to be the guy that stood out the most out of the running back room. There were some guys, like there was a lot of good running backs, like a lot of guys we expected to be good, but Brashard Smith seemed to be pretty intriguing to people. People talking about him at the Senior Bowl, saying like he had a great week of practice. His ability to catch the ball was he kind of separated himself in that area during practices and in the games and stuff. So I'm curious to see. You see the numbers there for him: 1,300 yards. And 40 catches. He didn't really produce at all. This was kind of his first year really having a lot of carries. He's a converted wide receiver to running back. He's one of those players. He was a wide receiver at Miami, and then he converted to running back. So is he going to follow the Antonio Gibson and the Tyrone Tracy career arc? Or even a guy like, wasn't Tony Pollard? I want to say Tony Pollard in college was kind of like a hybrid wide. Yeah, he was at Memphis, kind of that hybrid wide receiver running back. Is he going to follow that path? I'm always intrigued by these guys. I don't think he's going to go day 2, Brashard Smith. I think he is going to go day 3, and he might be a nice little deep, 3rd round, 4th round pick at the running back position in rookie drafts. And so, like, I'm super intrigued by him and to kind of get into the tape a little bit, because there's a lot of people that said he definitely stood out, especially as a pass catcher, which makes sense. The guy was a former wide receiver. So he's going to be undersized, but, like, can he be that 10, 12 touch kind of player where 3 or 4 of those are catches? Then he potentially becomes fantasy relevant. Some fallers at the running back position. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. I'm sure there's other risers and fallers, but I want to make this as I don't want to make this an hour-long video. Essentially, Woody Marks, running back from USC, seems to be a faller for some people. Now, the feeling I got from him and the next guy I'm going to talk about is that they weren't necessarily fallers in the sense of like they looked bad, but they were kind of fallers in the sense of like they didn't really stand out, and we expected them potentially to stand out at the Senior Bowl. And they were just kind of like, okay, they looked like part of potentially just that group of guys. They didn't stand out from the others, and then maybe we expected them to. We see Woody Marks there now. Woody Marks, I think one area where people were a little bit disappointed was him not really looking special as a pass catcher, because his raw production in or at USC in college in terms of the receiving production was insane. At Mississippi State, he played 4 years at Mississippi State. Here's his catches those 4 years: 60, 83, 48, and then 23 in 2023. Went to USC this year, caught 47 passes. So he literally has over 250 catches in his career as a running back, which is pretty insane. But the vibe I got from some people that I trust and respect is that he didn't really stand out, as a pass catcher, which is where I think he's going to make his bread and butter. Like, he is another one of these little bit undersized. I do think he actually weighed in a little bit bigger than people thought, which is potentially a good thing to see. But yeah, it's not necessarily that he, fell because he looked bad. He just didn't stand out, especially in the receiving game. Same with the next guy, Bashal Tootin, out of Virginia Tech. Again, another guy that's been incredibly productive. Over 1,150 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns, 17 total touchdowns. Another guy where I think we expected a little bit more, because some of the top guys weren't at the Senior Bowl. Some of the top running backs that are expected to go, like Ashton Genty wasn't there. Caleb Johnson wasn't there. Omarion Hampton wasn't there. These guys weren't seniors this last year, so they weren't there. And so, some of these other guys like Woody Marks, like Bashal Tootin. I forget if it's Bashal or Bashal Tootin. If I'm saying that wrong, my apologies. But we're expecting these guys to stand out because some of these other top guys weren't there. And again, it was just kind of like, all right, he kind of looked like one of the guys at the group there. So are they fallers? Again, is it the be all end all? Am I out on these guys? Absolutely not. But it is something to potentially keep an eye on, and it could hurt their draft class or their draft capital and where they get drafted. Into some risers, maybe the biggest riser maybe not the biggest, but maybe the best player at the Senior Bowl in terms of skill position fantasy players is Jack Besh from TCU, and people are loving Jack Besh. He absolutely killed it. I think he was the MVP of it. Everyone was talking about him, the amazing catches he was making, the game-winning catch that he made, and he probably increased his draft stock to a top 50 guy. What I like about Besh is that he can kind of be used all over the field. I don't think he has that one role either as an outside guy or a slot guy. I think he can be moved around. He can play inside, outside. He can put him in motion, all that stuff. And I think he probably got himself top 50 draft capital potentially from the Senior Bowl. Now, we're still months away from the draft, and a lot can happen, pro day, combine, all that stuff. But if he tests well at his pro day or combine, he probably locks himself as a top 50 guy, early second round pick guy. And he's definitely rising up people's boards. And it seemed like each and every day of the practices, I was reading something about Jack Besh and just what he was doing at the Senior Bowl. So I think I saw someone compare him a little bit to like Chris Godwin, which is like, is he like overly impressive in one area? No. In terms of like its athleticism, but his ability to just get open is undeniable. And so obviously if we're getting Chris Godwin, then that's a huge hit there. So curious to see where he starts to go in Dynasty rookie drafts. So people are going to start taking him more in the early second now that he's gotten a little bit of hype around him from the Senior Bowl. Jalen Knoll, actually, I think both Iowa State wide receivers, and again, this is not a comprehensive list of everyone, but I think both Iowa State wide receivers had good Senior Bowls. And Jalen Knoll is someone What is his ceiling for fantasy? I don't think his ceiling is ever going to be like a top 15, guy. Can he be a low end wide receiver two on the right offense? To me, he probably profiles a little bit more as like kind of a flex, a wide receiver 2/3, bye week replacement type of guy. Again, a lot of it's going to depend on where he falls in drafts and things like that. The key with Noel is going to be his ability is he going to play a majority in the slot? Can he play all over the place? And again, does he fall on the right offense? So I like Jalen Noel. I think I like him a little bit more than Jaden Higgins. I do think Jaden Higgins has some more, ceiling upside, but I do think Jalen Noel is just going to be a very solid receiver in the NFL, and he's going to have a role for a team. For many years. And there's value in drafting those kind of guys because you already have that base of like, okay, this is like worst case scenario, barring injuries. This is worst case scenario. But then there's always the chance that we underestimate these guys and we limit their ceiling. And then we realize, oh, this guy's like, Amon-Ra St. Brown's an example. Is like, we probably were limiting his ceiling. Oh, yeah, slot receiver, blah, blah, blah. Too small to be a difference maker. And then look what he's become. So there's value in those kind of guys that kind of give you that baseline floor. And then they can potentially go up from there. Some fallers, Restrepo. I saw some people not being super impressed with Xavier Restrepo out of Miami, which is kind of a bummer. But again, it's not the be all end all. I think they were just more concerned with like, is he just going to be stuck in the slot? And that's just what he's going to be. And so if that's the case, usually guys who strictly play in the slot, which is basically means you're only out there in 3 wide receiver sets, it's very hard to rely on those guys for fantasy consistently. Can they have good weeks or good years, even like a Cole Beasley? Sure. But it's going to be very hard to train Hunter Renfrow and stuff like that. Like it just takes like right place, right time for them to have that kind of season, and it's very hard to repeat. So saw some people saying that he was a little bit of a disappointment this at the Senior Bowl, and again, we'll see how the offseason and draft season progresses, what that means for him. Into the tight ends here, Elijah Arroyo. Maybe I kind of took back what I said about Besh being the biggest riser. Besh was already like a day 2 pick most likely, but Elijah Arroyo is a guy that I didn't even. He was kind of low on my list to scout, not low, but he wasn't in like the first couple of groups of tight ends. Now I've moved him up the board. Gonna start looking at him this week, and Elijah Arroyo seems to potentially, solidified himself. There's a chance that he has moved into that tight end 3 spot, right? I think a lot of people are leaning towards Fannin, maybe Mason Taylor or Gunnar Helm. But Elijah Arroyo might be the guy. Like he was just like impressing everyone. No, he was one of those guys. Like every single practice, every single update, Twitter account, it was like Elijah Arroyo, blah blah. Like it was cool to see. It was awesome to see. I'm excited to see Elijah Arroyo and potentially what this means for him. Pretty good production there, especially like the yards per reception. We normally don't see that from tight ends, which maybe shows like his explosiveness. 35 catches, you would say, that's not great. But then almost 600 yards on 35 catches is pretty insane for a tight end, for any position, really. I think that's like over 16 yards per reception, 600 on 35. I think it's over 16, actually. So I'm excited to look at him and just like, man, can he be like an explosive tight end, which is guys that I like to take shots on. And I'm excited to see potentially where he starts to be mock draft and where people are going to start taking him in dynasty rookie drafts. Mason Taylor's another guy that was a riser, according to, the people that I listen to. And again, just another guy who's in that next tier. Obviously you have Warren and Loveland, and then there's kind of a next tier of guys, whether it's Fannin, Mason Taylor, Gunnar Helm, now Elijah Arroyo. But he has a lot of potential, man. Athletically, he has a lot of potential. I thought that his route running looked good on the clips that I was watching in the game. Contested catch stuff was pretty good for him. I think he could probably improve as a blocker, but I don't think he's like bad as a blocker necessarily. But I I'm excited to see Mason Taylor. Has he kind of separated himself and in the argument for that tight end 3? I think there's a lot of good tight ends in this draft. So if you need tight ends, especially in tight end premium leagues, this is your draft to get them for sure. And then the last guy here we're going to talk about is Harold Fannin Jr. Again, a little bit of a cult following. I think the Senior Bowl affects guys like Harold Fannin Jr. the most because, a guy like Mason Taylor, we have an entire season's worth, right, of film to look at of him playing top tier competition. He played at LSU for 3 years, was heavily involved in the offense for 3 years, Mason Taylor. We have 3 years of film on the guy playing top tier level stuff. A guy like Harold Fannin, who unfortunately is playing in the MAC, for the last 3 years, had an insane season, led the FBS, led Division I in catches and yards, 117 catches, 1,555 yards. But the problem is people are going to discount him and say he played in the MAC. Well, how do you put those people, you prove those people wrong? You basically go out there in the Senior Bowl and places like this and you dominate and say, hey, I dominated against who I played, and now I'm dominating against guys, playing from the SEC and stuff. He just didn't really do that, in my opinion. He didn't look explosive. He didn't separate very well. He already has concerns about his blocking, and I don't think he looked very good as a blocker as well. He's kind of that tweener type of guy, that Chigakonkwo, Chigakonkwo, Jonnu Smith, Mike Gesicki, that's kind of like high end for him, ceiling for him. Or is he kind of just like a Jaheim Bell, who you guys will remember from last year out of FSU in South Carolina, I believe, who, fell to the 7th round because he's just like that tweener, right? He's that tweener type of player. And if you're not going to be a gifted pass catcher as a tweener, you're probably not going to get drafted very high because you're already lacking in the blocking game. So kind of a bummer for him. But, again, does it mean it's over? Not necessarily, but we'll see if someone takes a shot on Harold Fannin in day 2 of the NFL draft. But that's it for you guys, risers and fallers after the Senior Bowl. Appreciate you all. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video.